You're watching a production of South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
State House program funding provided by the South Dakota Bar Foundation, the educational and charitable arm of South Dakota lawyers and judges.
Through our, what is this, the 5th week, going into the 6th, we're getting lined up for crossover day. That's coming up here very, very shortly. And in the Senate, things are looking pretty good. We've got our bills moving through the process. We're starting to see some night sessions. The Commerce Committee is meeting after session, and the Senate Ag Committee met last night, way late into the night, discussing the meandered water bill or the non-meandered water bill. That came out of that committee late last night with a do not recommend, without recommendation, I should say, vote that's going to come to the floor. That'll have to get a motion to calendar, and then we'll see if that prevails. Then we'll have a debate on the bill. I think we've also asked the Lieutenant Governor to express a little bit more leeway, because on the motion to calendar, to change that motion to a do pass recommendation, it's mostly just speaking to the motion. We've asked him to provide a little leeway so we can have some more, maybe a little bit more debate on the bill, provided that because we don't know for sure if it's going to get calendared or not, but we'd like to have both sides to have their say whether or not the bill should be calendared. Other things that are going on, State Affairs had some interesting bills this week. We dealt with some campaign finance issues. We had an abortion bill up in State Affairs, and both those, one of the abortion bill passed out, left the floor late last week or earlier this week. So with that, I'll turn it over to the other gentleman. That's what's going on in the Senate.
Okay. Representative Lee Quam, House Majority Leader. Been a very busy week. I think yesterday we had 2 State Affairs meetings, and then last night we were in 414. I think we were in 414 for about 8 hours yesterday. So it was a long day. We got a lot accomplished. It's been a good week. We've seen a lot of bills moving in and through. Our calendar looks pretty good. We were going to take some bills today. I don't think we will, just because of the weather. Let people get home before the weather gets too bad. If the wind picks up, I think it could get real ugly really quick. We've had a wide variety of stuff come through State Affairs. You know, last night we had a bill up there to change term limit, or our terms of running for being in the legislature to 2 4-year terms. It didn't pass, but it had some great conversation. So we'll see what happens. But dealing with initiated measure, we dealt with a lot of stuff this week.
Good morning, Representative Kent Peterson from Salem, Assistant Majority Leader. Yeah, just kind of echo the comments of the previous two. It's been a busy week. As you see, I've got my helper here with me today, so things are good. And yeah, this week has kind of been a blur, you know, with kind of doing some two-a-days in state affairs. I'm on the House Judiciary Committee. We've met for, I think, 3.5 hours each day almost. And yesterday, kind of some bills of note. We had the primary, changing texting and driving to a primary from a secondary, seatbelt the same way. And so a little bit of everything. You know, we're taking them one at a time, but you still got to get through them all. So.
Good morning. I'm Blake Curd, a member of the South Dakota State Senate serving District 12 in Sioux Falls. I think you heard from Ryan Maher what the Senate's been up to over the last week. Certainly, we're both chambers are working towards getting our respective bill loads completed, and I look forward to the opportunity to answer your questions this morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. As it relates to the bill loads in your respective houses, I've seen some talk that, you know, maybe people are getting to the point where they're just going to can some of their bills. Are you guys seeing that because of the bill load, or is everybody working hard to get their respective legislation through?
Let me just clarify the question, if you could. Individual members of the House or Senate are looking to shelve their own legislative vehicles. Is that what you're asking?
No, not necessarily. Well, yes, yeah, that is what I'm asking.
I think people that have introduced things that are of importance to them or their constituents will continue to work very diligently to make sure that those get a fair hearing and that they get the opportunity to be heard on the floor of either the House or the Senate, whichever respective body they may be in. Certainly, as people get an attempt to move their legislation through either chamber, they may discover that there are issues with it that haven't been ironed out completely, and that might cause them to want to withdraw it and perhaps take another stab at it maybe later in the session through some other opportunity, or might even be delayed until the following year. So I don't think that, at least that I'm aware of, anyone in the Senate that's going to put a bill on the shelf just because of legislative fatigue. You know, we're out here to do a job. I think that we do it. People understand it's a important responsibility. We're not elected to do what's easy. We're here to do what is right on behalf of our constituents in the state. So I have not personally heard of anyone in the Senate who's suffering that kind of legislative fatigue that they've just decided to throw the towel in because it isn't worth it anymore.
As it pertains to the House, I would agree with Leader Curd's comments. I haven't personally heard, and I guess I'm not speaking for the leader, but anyone that has talked about you know, withdrawing a bill or tabling a bill because of the load that we have.
I would just agree. We had one bill withdrawn yesterday, that's not out of the norm, you know, for whatever reason, but I don't think fatigue enters into it. I think, you know, we're going to follow through and do what we can do to get everything done.
Senate Bill 199 was, you know, just debated last night in Senate Ag. I guess, what's the sense of how that bill will, I guess, play out on the Senate floor?
Yeah, well, we're going to hear that motion to calendar next week. We'll probably consider that the same day as Senate Bill 24. They both cover the same subject matter, as you're aware. I can't tell you at this point how the Senate's going to treat it. I know that there are proponents of 199 in its current form, and there are proponents of 24 in its current form. So I think it'll be a spirited floor debate next week on what could end up being 3 different motions: motion to calendar, motion for favorable consideration of 199, and motion for favorable consideration of 24. So we could have 3 individual votes on those bills next week, and we'll have to wait and see how it plays out.
And then I think in the House, Speaker Mickelson's bill on university teacher unions, does that seem like a bill that will, you know, go through the House there?
You know, that's a really good question. There's a lot of interest in it right now. There's feelings both ways. I don't really know what the feeling is in the House, whether it will go anywhere or not. I think it's got a good potential to make it, but obviously that's up to the people on the floor as they make that decision.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, we haven't spent a lot of time on that issue yet in caucus because it hasn't come before the floor. So, you know, I'm sure there's efforts on both sides lobbying the different members as to why they think one side's better than the other. And that'll continue into next week now, the way it looks, because we won't be taking that up today. So it'll be an interesting discussion. I'm sure a very lively and spirited discussion on the floor, and we'll take a vote and see what happens. So.
And then Senate Bill 169 and 173 dealing with some alcohol-related issues here in the state. I guess, what is the sense of, are you in favor of those two bills? Do you see those playing out favorably as well?
I'll talk about that if you'd allow me the latitude. 173 is the bill that I've sponsored, and when we heard testimony on that yesterday, I said that South Dakota has a great challenge, and it's an interesting problem to have. We've got a burgeoning industry that is growing and needs some assistance through regulatory relief. And so the direct answer to your question is, yeah, I think that's going to work out favorably for all parties involved. It's a great problem to be able to wrestle with when we have an industry here that's burgeoning, providing economic growth in their respective communities and jobs for folks. It's an exciting time, and it's part of what being in the Senate is, what makes it so rewarding, is to be able to work on those kind of issues on behalf of the people that are here in South Dakota trying to bring something new forward or grow something that's been here for a while. So I think that we're going to find favorable resolution and probably come out with a product that everybody will be able to support. Would you like us to run the Democratic press conference too while we're here and just get it knocked off?
I guess speaking a little bit to my colleague's question over here about the number of bills, I guess, you know, going through, it seemed like, at least from the press side, you know, a lot of bills coming up, getting killed in committee. It just seems like, you know, committees are rifling through a lot of bills. I guess, could you speak to that? Does it have to do with the number of bill load? Is it crunch time? You know, those sorts of things?
Well, it is kind of getting down to crunch time. Obviously, we have to run a lot of stuff through in a short amount of time. I think we're giving everything a very fair hearing. I have not heard anybody say we didn't treat them fairly in the process. And if it's a good idea, it's going to make it through. If not, it's probably not going to make it through. And that's what the process is. That's how it works.
I think it's like salmon breeding, this part of the legislative process. The strong survive and the weak don't make it. So I think that's what we're seeing here now, is there are bills that are in some cases swimming upstream. Others are going to make it without much impediment and find their way to favorable consideration because they're good bills and they're important for South Dakota. Others are not going to fare as well. So if you want to use that, this is the salmon season in the legislature. It kind of is.
I unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to look yet, but have you guys had a sense of revenue numbers in the state? And I know there's been some potential push to increase maybe some education funding or state employee funding. Is that something that's being discussed?
Well, we can talk about that a week from today, probably, because the revenue projection numbers will be set next Thursday, I believe. Maybe after our I don't remember if it's after our press conference or not, but until that point, it's purely speculation, and it's not even wise to comment, in my opinion, on it until that point. We will be getting some information early in the week next week, and then our appropriations committees will have a subcommittee from the House and the Senate that will go kind of line by line through the numbers and pick up projected revenue estimates, and then we will begin our budget formulation from that point on.
Well, since we don't seem to have a plethora of questions this morning, I'm going to posit one back to the press. And I haven't had a chance to talk with Lee about this yet, but I'm intrigued by the possibility. I was talking to Billy Sutton over the last couple of days about how we have traditionally done these press conferences. And I'd like to posit to you that for one of these sessions on a morning when we're all leaving town, that we all get together in this room and answer questions simultaneously. I think it might be an interesting format to ask the same questions and get point, counterpoint, and whether we agree or disagree on whatever the subject matter might be. I think it might be more interesting for the press folks that are here, and perhaps even more interesting for us. So it's I don't think it'll turn into a free-for-all, and I don't imagine there'll be any chair throwing in this room. I think the leaders in both parties are statesmen when they discuss things. Certainly we don't agree all the time, but we're always respectful here in the legislature, and it's something that I think we should consider doing if the press has interest in it.
I certainly wouldn't have a problem with that. I think it could be very good, could be fun.
I guess I would be for that. That's a good idea.
You don't have to decide today. You can do your homework and come back and let us know. But you know, we're never fearful of the questions that come from the press. You represent our constituents and the folks at home that are wondering what we're doing out here. So I think we look for any opportunity to get more information out about what the legislature is doing. And if that's a format that you would find favor with, I think we should take a look at it.
session, so things are stepping up, as you can see here. Representative Spence Hawley, the Democratic leader for the House, and I have Senator Troy Heinert this morning's with us. He's the Assistant Democrat leader in the Senate side. This week, the last few weeks, we've been talking about quiet and slow, and the rumor was that there was a bunch of bills out there. Well, the rumor was true. There was a bunch of bills out there, as you all know. We had 534 bills totally filed as compared to the 330 or 340 last year. I know from our side on State Affairs, we met 4 times this week, and we're probably going to have to meet more next week again to get all the bills we've got going through. This week, change a little bit more the focus and the discussion what's happening. One of the issues that we're seeing is we've talked a little bit about initiated measures and referred measures and the bills, and there's been, you know, excess of 30 bills introduced limiting initiated and referred measures this year. We had the task force last summer, the legislature did, to review the initiated measures and referendum process, and there was a handful of bills that were brought forth out of that committee, and we supported most of those, and most of those were taken care of early in session, but since then, it's just like it's an onslaught. On the House side alone, I was going through and listing, you know, we had, in State Affairs, we had 1282, out-of-state advertising. Any campaign that's run has to say that there's out-of-state money on it if it's initiated in referendum, and that passed out-of-state fairs. There was a 1302 to prohibit compensation for circulators. Right now, some circulators can be paid. That was defeated, thank God, in State Affairs. 1304, we had challenges to the petition signatures to make it easier to challenge the signatures on a petition, and that was passed out of the State Affairs. We had 1201, which requires information on the ballot for initiated measures. You've got to have at the bottom of it the name of the sponsor and if he received any compensation, if he's a registered lobbyist, and that's passed out and it's going to the floor. We had 1216 to limit state out-of-state contributions to $100,000 on initiated or referred measures. This has been declared constitutional in other states, but we passed out State Affairs, so we'll have that on the floor. We had 1196, and this was, well, I'll probably go to 1177 first. This was a simple one that says on your, if you're passing a petition as a circulator, you need to have your name, email, phone number, and originally residence on there. We were able to get the residence stricken off, but it went through. And as I mentioned on the floor yesterday, I voted against this one. I might have supported it if that was the bill we were talking about instead of the whole body of bills that are coming forward. We had 1196 on the floor yesterday. This was the one that gets into the circulators. And I brought along, there's a section 6 in there, and every time I read it, I'm still flabbergasted that we passed it out and sent it across. If you're a circulator, you have to do a sworn affidavit to circulate the petition, and then to do that, in that affidavit, you've got to say which state you're licensed to drive, what your driver's license number is, your expiration date of your driver's license, your current state of voter registration, your length of time at your current physical address, your 2 previous addresses, and whether your addresses were in South Dakota, whether your current physical address of your immediate family members are located in South Dakota, the current state in which your motor vehicle is owned or leased, and a sworn statement of the circulator indicating your intention to stay in the state after the circulation deadline, including the type and location of your intended employment. Anything else relevant to residency, including your library card and your utility bills. And then you have to say if you pay in-state tuition at a secondary school. Then if you have a resident hunting or fishing license of any kind, and you have to give them that. And then what's your prefix on your mobile phone? What's your, and all that is required before you can even circulate a petition. Now, I understand what they're after. The intent is that it's right now against the law for somebody out of state to circulate petitions in South Dakota if you're not a resident. And I agree with that. We don't want that to happen. But this is such an onerous bill on what it does to our average citizen of South Dakota who truly has a concern and they want to circulate a petition. And oh, by the way, if there's any violation of one of those parts there, you lose the ability to contribute to any campaign for 4 years. And if there's a violation of somewhere in this, the ballot can be taken off of the voting. So it's just a terrible bill, which was passed forward. It'll go over the Senate. And so I'm just giving you a heads up. You guys will have an opportunity. The frustration level comes from the fact not that we're having this discussion on a bill or making a tweak to our initiated measures. The discussion is if you want to stop the initiative process in South Dakota, then they need to bring a bill and we need to have that discussion. I would say the voters of South Dakota don't want to stop the initiated process and the referral process, and they would not be supportive of it. This is simply the means to just try to squeeze it down to make it impossible for people to put it on the ballot. We had some other bills come through. I brought the Redistricting Commission that we would like to bring it to a vote that we would change how we redistrict. We would take it out of the hands of the legislatures and set up a 9-member nonpartisan commission. Many states across the nation are having this discussion right now. Matter of fact, Indiana, the Republicans are in the majority, and they've presented a bill to switch from legislators to a commission, even the majority party. So it's just kind of, this is a discussion that's happening. Legislators should not be allowed to pick their voters. The voters should pick the legislators, is the way I feel for it. Then the other one we've had on the floor through the House was 1199, prohibit collective bargaining at the Board of Regents. We had this discussion in the Senate. It was, State Affairs, and it was passed out of the House State Affairs, and it'll be coming to the floor scheduled for today, either tomorrow or today. This is a bill that doesn't solve anything. When I visit with administrators at SDSU, they said the collective bargaining works well for them. They have a person or group of people to visit with, negotiate. If there's grievances, there's a process to bring it forward through, and they don't see a problem at all with how it's working right now. When you visit with the professors, the researchers, they think this is extremely important to them. The second part of it's the message it sends to the people. SDSU, USD have switched to a D1, Division I. It's not only an athletic deal, it's an academic deal, raising the level. School of Mines had great emphasis, raising their programs and what they're doing out there. We've got a freeze going on for the second year in state employees. We've had cuts in the past. We've had freezes in the past also. Now you couple this with getting rid of their ability on the collective bargaining to have discussions. And whether it makes a difference or not, the difference is in their minds. And when they're looking at universities to go to and they're trying to make a decision, first off, they know they're not going to make top dollar coming to South Dakota. There's other benefits. But then if they look, what is their attitude towards education and to higher ed? And if it's, well, you guys, we don't really respect you and we don't think that you should be able to be involved in negotiating, they're going to make a decision to go someplace else. It's quite simple. So I see this as a detriment, and I would say that 80% of the emails that I get from the professors and the university employees, that's their comments. Why did I make the decision to come to a state who has no respect for us anyhow? So there's several other bills I can go in, and I need to turn it over to Senator Heinert and let him talk a little about what's happening on the Senate side then.
Well, thank you, Spence, and good morning. Senator Troy Heinert, District 26. So the Senate's been fairly busy. We've been clearing our calendar every day, taking debate on the floor, which, some of it has been pretty good. We've dealt with lots of resolutions, as we kind of expected in the Senate. Obviously, there's 2 people in the Senate running for a higher office, so a lot of those are attempted to try to force a vote out of those 2 individuals. In state affairs, we dealt with a bill yesterday, 129, that was sponsored by Senator Sutton. And what it did was restored the campaign finance limits from IM 22. Senator pitched the bill. There were no opponents. You know, it was just straightforward. Install those same limits that was passed by the voters in IM 22. No other title, no other ramifications in any part of that. Like I said, there was no opponents. There weren't even any questions asked. I made the motion to do pass. It was seconded, called for the vote, and completely failed. 2 yay votes, Senator Sutton and myself. And that was frustrating to me. You know, if you're going to vote against something that the voters had just passed, at least you could do is ask questions. And it just kind of shows that this level of arrogance that is happening right here in Pierre. And I don't think that's fair to the voter in South Dakota. So, you know, those kind of things are still happening. I'm surprised that even with all of the dealings with IM 22 that we had last year, that there is the number of initiated measure, campaign finance, petition circulator bills coming this year. I thought that as riled up as people were last year, that maybe we'd get a break from that, but obviously I guessed wrong. You know, the Senate has been busy. I think we've seen some stances on taken by a few of our members that are directed at a certain population in our state, and that has created some controversy and angst in the chamber. You know, hopefully we can get past that and get down to doing the business that we're supposed to be doing. I'm glad to answer any questions. You know, one thing I am proud of in the Senate, we recognized and honored the 150-year anniversary of the signing of the Fort Laramie Treaty, and that passed 25-7. You know, I think that's a big step. You know, being a tribal member from a tribal community, you know, that is one of our founding documents, and you know, we still hold that to be true. I was glad the Senate recognized its importance, and hopefully we'll just keep working together to try to bridge that gap between Native and non-Natives in our state and arrive at the same place.
Good. Questions?
Senator Heinert, do you think that some of the changes to the initiative process, will they have much luck in the Senate? It seems like maybe the Speaker is pushing a lot of those things. So have you had conversations about how it might go in your chamber?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot in the Senate. I don't think we're going to, a lot of those measures are going to gain a lot of traction in the Senate. You know, we've sent a few out ourselves that I kind of frankly was surprised even come out of our chamber. But it'll just depend on how well it's pitched and what the appetite is. You know, if some of the stuff that we've sent out to the Senate makes it through, I think the Senate's going to say, you know, that's probably good enough. We don't need to go down this road as well.
On I think it was Senator Curd's craft brewing bill yesterday, I think you voted for that, but Senator Sutton voted against it. Do you know how Democrats might come down on the governor's proposal versus Senator Curd's proposal?
Well, you know, my vote yesterday was, let's get it to the floor. Let's see where some compromise is. Obviously, this is an industry that is growing and changing. Other states are seeing a huge influx of microbreweries, and I think we're starting to see it here. You know, the three-tiered system in South Dakota has been working. I was kind of surprised that, you know, in the last year of a lame duck session that the governor wanted to take on all the alcohol laws. I mean, that is a huge endeavor, and I just don't know in a 40-day session if we're able to come up with some kind of compromise and meet the needs of everybody. But I think the conversation has been started between Senator Curd's bill, the governor's bill, and we'll just see where that lands.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I'm on a Commerce Committee on the House side, and we've got the alcohol bills coming through there. But in reference to your question, it's really not a partisan discussion at all. So you say how the Democrats going to come down on it. It'll be an each individual decision, in honesty. We really aren't taking a caucus position on this. So it's more of just what works for your district and what works for South Dakota will be the discussions that we'll have.
Last night there was the robust, non-meandered discussion. You voted in favor of the pass without recommendation, but said you don't personally favor the bill. Any sense as to, how that debate's going to play out when it comes up?
So yes, last night the Ag and Natural Resources Committee dedicated just about 3 hours, maybe a little over, to opening up the non-meandered waters talks again. I supported the motion with no recommendation. I had told everybody that I wouldn't support a due pass. I don't really like SB 199. I think it is unfair to landowners, and I think it could have some unintended consequences if they start these hearings in local areas to either open or close a certain body of water. So what will happen is we'll have to vote to calendar it. And if they get a majority, then we will put it on the calendar and have the debate. If they don't, then, it's over. I'm not going to support calendaring it. I think, I've been here 6 years, and we've dealt with it probably three or four bills every year in my 6 years. We even had a special session. We come up with a plan that is, for all intensive purposes, working right now. I think that should be the law, and then remove the sunset. And if we run into problems, then we come back and fix each piece as it arises. I think throwing out what we did in the special session, adopting 199, probably isn't the way to go. I know that there is legislative fatigue on this issue. So we'll see what happens today, whether we vote to calendar it or not. I have no idea where that ends up.
Sorry to ask about alcohol one more time, but for both of you, but also I think Senator Heinert, you had kind of brought up concerns about this last year, about lawmakers voting on things in which they have a business interest or some sort of monetary interest. Do either of you have any concerns about, I think primarily, Senator Colbeck or Representative Beal being distributors voting on that bill, and then maybe to a lesser extent some of the bar owners, Senator Maher, Senator Ewing maybe, or Kamak, I can't remember who else. Do you have any issues with that?
Well, I can tell you, I used to be in this business as well. I don't own my establishment anymore. And I think there is something to having people with knowledge of the industry, kind of that inside expertise. I would hope that they are able to make decisions based on what's good for South Dakota, not just them personally. I know all those gentlemen, and I find them to be honorable people. I think it is a little different than some of the issues that I raised last year with the IM-22 lawsuit, just in the fact that they were saying they were self-funding it and that kind of thing. So, I'm going to listen to what they have to say, and then having the expertise of owning a bar and being part of that process, might give me a little bit different insight, and even for our caucus. So we'll see what they have to say. I don't see it as a problem right now. It's got to pass the entire legislature, so we'll see where it goes.
We passed the conflict of interest laws just a couple years ago, and the concern there was more that these are appointed boards and commissions usually, and we want to make sure that you can't stack it with conflict of interest, and so you got to disclose all of it. The legislature's a different deal. Every 2 years we go back to our voters, and we aren't allowed on the floor to abstain or not vote because we got a conflict of interest. We're expected to vote on every bill. And to be honest, I would say that we all have some conflict of interest in a bill or two throughout the year, no matter what it is. But we're picked by the voters to make a decision and to hopefully represent them in South Dakota. And if they think that our conflict of interest is overweighing our decisions in their benefit, they can vote us out. So I don't have a problem with those members being involved and being involved in the discussion. Representative Beals on our Commerce Committee, and he can bring into discussion some information that we may not have otherwise. So, and we know where they're coming from, so everything's above board, I guess. Any other questions at all? Thank you for your time. Have a safe drive home.
Thank you.
By the South Dakota Bar Foundation, the educational and charitable arm of South Dakota lawyers and judges. Programming is made possible with your annual membership in the Friends of South Dakota Public Broadcasting. Additional funding provided by...
Today, we're moving the prairie forward. For the farmers and manufacturers, you are our member owners. Together, we are re-energizing rural.
Every day, Janet is able to repel distributed denial of service attacks, rushing her server at 300 million meters per second. With her impressive 25-inch reach, she can access her keyboard 6% faster than other IT professionals, which helps. Plus, Janet's business is protected by SDN Communications' Managed DDoS Protection Services. Even IT pros up their game when they partner with SDN. Enjoy the uptime.
Missouri River Energy Services, a not-for-profit utility providing electricity and energy services to municipal utilities in South Dakota and throughout the region. More about Missouri River Energy Services at mrenergy.com.